Welcome to a new video! Today we're going to continue taking a look at Wild Survivors, which is the set that are supposed to be released at the end of this week at the time of recording this video. Now, because of, the release of it, I decided to postpone my Raid Raptor list and essentially talk about Vanquish Soul and Nova Liz. Vanquish Soul first because of, numerical order it's supposed to come first, and then, of course, Nova Liz. But also another reason that I wanted to talk about these archetypes is because of the fact that it feels like the ban list also came up in a way to kind of just help Wild Survivors, especially with the fact of Vanquish Soul, which essentially got 7 ultra rare slots. And we're going to talk about them and essentially break them down. But we won't jump right into the video itself. I'm going to remind you that if you want to help the channel and support me in any way, you can consider subscribing to the channel, give a like into the video, and of course if you have any questions, any kind of comments that you want to tell me about the archetype or some particular thing that you think is important, of course keep it civilized. I will be more than welcome. You'll be more than welcome to leave your comments and I will answer it as soon as possible. But without further ado, let's jump right into the archetype itself, and we're going to start with the archetype mechanics. So the archetype's mechanics are actually pretty simple. The archetype works around 3 attributes: dark, fire, and earth. Surprisingly, they haven't gone with the route of all 6 attributes, because when they say this archetype, revealed the concept art for this archetype boss monster, I thought they will basically do elemental warriors with all the attributes. But they have only chosen the 3, first ones in terms of alphabetical order, excluding divine, which is dark, earth, and fire, which is really cool. Maybe it's a rumor, maybe in the future we'll get the water, wind, light archetype that is against it or support it. We'll have to see. But the point is, this is how this archetype works. And the idea of this archetype is that you have a quick effect with any of your main deck monsters that allowing you to reveal the appropriate monster in your hand or monsters to activate the effect. You have 2 effects basically available that you can choose from: the effect of 1 attribute reveal and the effect of 2 or more attribute revealed. Max 3, of course. So let's say you have a monster on your main side of the field that have, the effect of fire. You can reveal even an Ash Blossom, but you reveal a fire monster and then it get the effect. If you also have the fire and dark as well in your hand, you can also reveal those and activate their effects. So yeah, that's kind of really cool about this archetype. It's basically very interesting. Also, they have their own individual effect, and one thing I will say is that both effects cannot be activated in the same chain. So do keep that in mind. With that out of the way, now we can actually talk about the archetype itself. And I'm actually going to start by talking about the 3 level 4 monsters of the archetypes before we'll jump into the bigger ones: Raisin, Panthera, and Dr. Madlove. All of these 3 are supposed to be your centerpieces. In my opinion, you need to run 3 copies of each. Maybe Panthera you can get away with 2, but there are your main monsters of the archetype. Raisin is your searcher for your non-warrior Vanquish Soul monster from your deck to your hand. Panthera is a free special summon to the to your side of the field if you have no monsters in your main monster zone, and Dr. Madlove is a searcher for any of your Vanquish Soul spells and traps. Basically, that's their effects. They're very simple. As for their own individual effects where it comes to revealing monsters in their hand, Raisin, reveal a fire monster. This card cannot be destroyed by card effects this turn, and if you reveal a fire and a dark, it can destroy all other monsters in the same column. Panthera, if you reveal an earth, this card cannot be destroyed by battle this turn, and if you reveal an earth and fire, destroy all spells and trap this card in this card's column, which is pretty cool. As for, Dr. Madlove, you reveal 1 dark monster and you have 1 face-up monster your opponent controls lose 500 attack and defense. If you reveal a dark and an earth, you return 1 face-up monster to your hand with the lowest defense. So this archetype, little mini boss monsters, mini guys, not boss monsters. The boss monsters are a little bit later. They're really cool. Their secondary effect of the cannot be destroyed by card effect, cannot be destroyed by battle, the stuff of that is actually really good. I think Dr. Madlove out of these 3 has the best effect because it can bounce something that is weaker than her, because she has 2000 defense, which is really big, and mostly also this archetype has very high defense, so it actually works in your favor mostly. So yeah, that can actually work. As for their own individual, I think Raisin is a 5-star because it's basically search your good cards. It search everything that you need in the archetype, especially Panthera, because you can use Raisin with a link monster, link it into the link monster, which we'll talk about it later, and then you have your main monster zones open, and then you have a free special summon for Panthera. Panthera getting a 3, just nice extender, nothing more than that. It's just really, really cool. Funny enough, you can use it in any other archetype that is also Beast Warrior, which is might actually be relevant for Tri Brigades or any other archetype that just is a Tri Beast that needs an extender. I don't know, that's an option out there because you have just not to control any monster in the main monster zone, and it's a pretty special summon. Who knows? And of course, you have the Dr. Mudlove, which is getting a 4-star out of me because the search for spells and traps in this archetype is a little bit worse because the spells and traps not the best. We'll talk about them. I'm not saying they're bad, like I'm talking about, except the one that is not searchable, they're okay. But it's still a very, very nice card, essentially just having a second Stratos. So that's it for the smaller Vanquish Souls monsters. Let's now talk about the big ones. So the first one, we have Heavy Borger, we have followed up by Planton HG, and then we also have Kaiser's Versus, which is the big bus monster of the archetype. As for Heavy Borger, it has the effect as a quick effect to target one non-machine Vanquish monster you control and return it to your hand, and if you do, you special summon this card. And then you can reveal one of the appropriate, monster effect. Of course, if you reveal a dark, you get to draw a card. If you reveal an earth from a fire, you inflict 1500 damage to your opponent. In a case of Gladden, it's basically allowing you that if you control no monsters in your main monster zone, again another free special summoner, or all monsters you control are Vanquish Soul monsters, you get to special summon this card out of your hand. You reveal a fire, this card gains 3000 defense, and if you reveal a dark or an earth, this card gets 3000 attack. Which is pretty interesting, kind of like either defensive or offensive kind of a card. And then the last one is Kaiser Versus, which is the big boss monster. Kaiser Versus allowing you to target non-dragon, Vanquish Soul monster you control, return it to the hand as a quick effect, of course, and special this card out of your hand, and then you reveal the appropriate monsters from your hand to activate one of the effects. If you reveal an earth, this card is unaffected by your opponent's card effect, activate effect this turn, not card effects, but activated effects. And then if you reveal all 3 attributes, you're able to destroy one other card on the field, which is pretty interesting. So let's talk about them by themselves after, of course, looking at the, the monsters of the archetype. So first and foremost, all of these monsters has different kind of levels, so they cannot really use as an Xyz or something. I wish they were all level 8 as the 3 small ones were all level 4, but that's beside the point. I think the best one out of all the 3 of them, it's going to sound crazy, but it's Heavy Borger. This card is really, really awesome. It's basically allowing you to, whenever you activate a Vanquish Soul search effect, like a Razor or Dr. Mudlove, to basically just not care about any infinite impermanence or effect veiler effects. Because when they activate infinite impermanence, oh hey, I have a Heavy Borger. I just bounce it to the hands, special summon this, I basically just don't have any problem resolving the effect, which is really cool. The additional thing that's going on for it is the fact that you can draw cards every single turn. It's really, really cool, and it's just very, very stupid the amount of cards you can draw. It's also have the effect that you're able to burn your opponent, which is also good in time. So this card just does it all. For me, it's getting a 5 stars just because the much utility this card gives the archetype, the draws, the fact that it's able to just free special summon itself and save a monster effect if you need it, and the fact that it can help you in time, just very, very good card. As for Gladden getting 2, it's only played, in my opinion, just because it's an additional fire. It doesn't really do anything. Like, the fact that it's able to basically be a 3000 beat stick with revealing a dark and an earth, that's fine. And it's also a free special summon, so also I guess I will give it that. But the problem with this card, again, yes, it's a free special summon, yes, it's the same thing as Panthera, but unlike Panthera, its effects are not really that good, and you need very, very specific things to actually make this attack. If it can attack, it's 3000 beater, but it's not really the best. It's okay. 2 stars is not terrible, you just play it at 1, maybe a 2 in some builds, but I think 1 is enough. As for the big boss monster itself, it's another bouncer, just like, the Heavy Borger. but a little bit worse than Heavy Border because its own effects are not really that good. Like the effect of unaffected by your opponent activate effect this turn, that's fine, but the second effect is a little bit too costly in my opinion. As a boss monster, I think it's getting a 3. I think it is a card that you're playing at 1 in most builds that I sing Heavy Border been played like a 2 or 3 because it's such an easy card to activate, and the fact that it's giving you draw is awesome. So yeah, I think that Kaiser Versus is fine. It's not the best boss monster. But that does it for the main deck monsters for this archetype. Now we can actually talk about the extra deck. The extra deck, we have Rock of the Vanquisher. This card requires 1 Vanquish soul monster, of course, and it cannot be used as a link material, period. The other thing says that this card is that he's have 2 effects. The first one is that during the main phase, there's a quick effect. You are able to activate one of the effects to either special summon a Vanquished Soul from my hand, or special summon, or should I say, add a Vanquished Soul monster from my graveyard to my hand, which is sometimes very, very good because of the fact that you're able to maybe resolve some effects. The fact that, for example, I need a fire for my graveyard, I just get it back to my hand. Very, very nice. Additional thing that goes for this card is that while you control a Vanquished Soul monster, your opponent monster can only target a monster with the highest attack for their attack. Of course, they're chosen tied, but essentially kind of a little bit of battle immunity. I think this card getting 3 out of me, it's fine. The ability to just gain every single turn a resource is very, very good. It's not the best thing in the world, but the fact that it's a monster, like it's a resource out of the graveyard every single turn, it's maybe a special summon every single turn, it's just very, very nice. I don't think it's broken. I think it's okay. I think it's a decent card, and honestly, just a nice addition. The fact that you're able to just recycle the things that you want to, very, very good. But now does it for the main deck and extra deck monsters. Now we're actually moving on into our spells. We have 3 spells: Stake Your Souls, which is the card that you cannot search, Vanquish Soul Dust Devil, and Vanquish Soul Continue. These are the 3 cards that you have going on for you, and Stake Your Soul is basically the card that I mentioned that is really, really good that you cannot search. Basically, Stake Your Soul has the following effect. You reveal a monster in your hand, and you special summon 1 Vanquish Soul monsters with a different name but the same attribute. That's why you have 2 monsters of each attribute of your 3 attributes. But you return it to its owner hand during the end phase, which is kind of good because if your opponent trying to steal it, it still returns to your hand. So that's actually kind of interesting. However, the idea of utility for this card is few things. First and foremost, you have a fire in your hand like a glutton. You're able to summon your Raisin get a search, and you're also able to immediately link it into your Rock of the Vanquisher, and then you're able to basically, get it back to your hand, or special summon a thing out of your hand and not get this essentially negative effect. So that's really, really good for this card. I'm going to give this card 5 stars. I think it's absolutely amazing. As for Vanquish Soul Dust Devil, this is basically just a Book of Moon. By targeting a Vanquish Soul you control, changing its battle position, and then you're able to change face-up monster your opponent control to face-down defense position up to the number of Vanquish Souls monsters you control with different names. It's basically a Book of Moon / Book of Eclipse. Very, very nice. 3 stars, just a nice interruption for the archetype. And Vanquish Soul Continue, you pay 500 life points and allowing you to either add a Vanquish Soul monster from your graveyard to your hand, or special summon it in defense position. Again, very, very cool. A Monster Reborn, 2 stars. So honestly, I think about the spells, Stake Your Soul is absolutely amazing. It's basically just allowing your archetype to even do crazy things. But the other 2 are also pretty decent compared to the traps, which I'm going to talk about them, which are not really that good. We have Trinity Burst and Calamity Kaiser for our 2 traps. Now, in the case of Trinity Burst, it's not terrible. It's allowing you to target a Vanquish Soul monster you control, special summon up to 2 Vanquish Soul monsters with different names from each other and different original attributes from the targeted monster, and they have their effect negated, of course, and they return to the hand, and then you can return all opponent cards in that target and the summoned monsters columns to the hand, and you can only use this card once per turn. Now, granted, this card is not terrible, but it's not amazing. Like, sure, you can return up to 3 cards technically up to, if you count the extra monster zones, you can return up to 7 cards if all of their, places are full. But you also need to have the, different types and attributes, because sometimes it's not really that easy. So I'm going to give this card a 2. It's not useless, it's very, very good when it resolves, but most of the time you prefer to have your Dust Devil as your interruption because, well, it's a Book of Moon, it at least does something and can stop many decks. As for Kaiser, Calamity Kaiser, this card is bad because it's working with targeting. Because if your opponent activates a spell, trap card, or monster effect that target cards you control, while you control a Vanquish Soul, you can engage the activation and destroy that card, and then you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to half of one of your Vanquish Soul monsters you control. I'm going to give this one a 1. I think it's actually quite terrible. Because of the fact that it works with targeting, it's very, 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 very hard to resolve. It's not terribly hard, but I would say Trinity Burst and, as again, Dust Devil are better options because they're less reliant of your opponent. If it was an Omni Negate, I would say this card is like a 3-4 stars easily, but unfortunately it's not. So yeah, this card is just fun. But that does it for the Vanquish Soul archetype. Took me a little bit more than I wanted to, but Vanquish Soul is an archetype that needs a little bit more explanation because of the, weird effects that it has. But now let's talk about what's good and bad about this archetype. So, first and foremost, this archetype has a lot of quick effects going on for it, which is very, very good. It has 2 free special summoners out of the hand that allowing you to basically escape things like Effect Veiler, Infinite Impermanence, or things of that nature, which is really, really good. And it's also have 2 Searchers, which is very, very nice. It's able to keep resources really, really easily with Vanquisher, Rock of the Vanquisher, and it's also able to do some pretty nice stuff. It's a very, very good control deck. However, it has a few things going on against it. As a control deck, it doesn't really have a lot of control tools, even if you count additional things that you can play, like Bakuska or things of that nature, which we'll talk about later. Mostly what it can do is draw tons of hand and essentially depends on hand traps. That's literally what this archetype does, and it's not always the best way to play the game. Now, granted, you can also play Floodgates and try to maybe going first and essentially draw into them, because this deck can actually draw quite a bit with it. What's his name again? Heavy Border, and of course it can also play Heat Soul, so you can draw stuff. Very, very cool, but it's not always enough. The other thing that also works against this archetype is that if you remove its monsters, it basically doesn't really do anything, and most of its, quick effects not really do a whole lot. Like, they do stuff, but not really that much as I thought they will do. So this archetype is fine, and it's definitely not terrible, but it's kind of need a little bit more support to essentially continue doing a thing. So maybe in Age of Overlord, which is the new OCG set, so we're going to see new cards which essentially going to support this archetype. But let's talk about what cards are actually good to play in this archetype. Well, 2 cards that come to mind are absolutely amazing in this archetype, which are Tenki and Rhoda. Both of these cards are basically cards that help you to search your Raisin and Panthera, which is really, really nice. You also have a Small World archetype. Basically, this archetype really works with Small World. It can search all of its cards with all of its own cards. It has different attributes, it has different types, it just has it all where it comes to Small World. Additionally, like I mentioned before, Baguska is actually very, very good in this archetype, as well as a Splash Mage and Heat Soul package, giving you the ability to essentially just get into more draws and essentially draw into more hand traps or maybe floodgates, as I mentioned before. Mostly this deck works with hand traps, but floodgates can also be an option. As for additional OTK potential, we do have Zodiac Borbo and WLA Zeus, I guess a Zodiac package, and Zeus, which essentially just work with this archetype as well. But that does it for the cards that are good in this archetype. Now let's talk about the cards that are good against it. Well, a card that's also good in it, which is Ash Blossom, is also very, very good against it, because yes, it has Heavy Border to bounce things against Imperm, but Ash is a card that just like negate the effect. It doesn't negate the monster. So it's kind of just works really well against it, and sometimes like the fact that you don't have the ability to search can really hurt the deck. DD Crow can be very annoying against Rock of the Vanquisher. You can lose your target, which is really annoying. Same goes for Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. All of these three cards as well can also be played in this archetype, giving you the ability to have a very nice favorable mirror match, as well as just like very good cards that work with your attribute. Kaijus and anything of that nature can also work in this archetype as well. Even if you summon a Kaiser that is unaffected, this contribute over it. If you basically have, like, for example, I don't know, a Kaiju that contribute over it, that works, or a Lava Golem or something of that nature. Another thing is that if you remove sometimes the monsters, their cards just turned off. So Gamma Seal and, like I said, Santa Claus, all of those cards are really good. And of course, Lightning Storm or any kind of board breaker can also hurt this archetype as well. But that does it for the cards that are good against it and for the archetype breakdown as an overall. Overall, I think this archetype is decent. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's broken. I don't think it's like anything like Konami pushes it to be. I think it's a cool archetype, don't get me wrong. But I don't see this archetype being broken. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's something I don't see, and maybe the tops in the OCG are like not an indication, because the OCG is a little bit different than us, and the OCG, this archetype doesn't really, like, it's tops, but not that much. But on the other hand, like I mentioned before, this archetype is a little bit more control, and control is more favorable in the OCG. So I don't know, it's an interesting archetype to evaluate. We'll have to wait and see. For now, I'm going to give this archetype 3.5 stars. I'm going to lower it down to 3 because I think it's kind of like middle of the road. It's just missing some very important cards to essentially just make it really powerful. Maybe getting like additional one monster of each attribute can actually be very nice. Doubtful that's what they will do. They may be going to give us, like, you know, a new Link monster, or maybe even like an Xyz monster, or maybe even like, you know, new spells and trap that can actually work. Who knows? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see where it comes to this archetype. But yeah, for now it's fine. It's decent. It's a cool archetype to pick. Going to be very expensive, but still fine. And I think it's actually decent. So yeah, that's pretty much does it for the video. Hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something about Vanquish Souls, or if you have anything to say to me in the comments, maybe I'm getting something wrong, maybe I forgot about something, it will be very much appreciated. So let me know in the comments down below, what do you think? But that does it for the video. See you next time, and I will see you in the Novellas review, which is pretty much the archetype that I found the most funny and interesting out of the three. So see you next time. Bye-bye.